The sound of boots crunching on fresh snow pierced the frigid morning silence as federal agents surrounded Karen's secluded cabin. A mysterious package had triggered an urgent investigation, one that would unravel a twisted tale of neighborhood feud, petty vengeance, and the chilling consequences of interfering with the United States Postal Service. Sam peered anxiously through the frosted window as the unmarked vehicles pulled into his driveway. Just yesterday, his morning routine had been upended when he discovered his mailbox stuffed with a haphazard pile of soggy, undelivered mail. Now, it seemed, the authorities had finally caught up with Karen. Sam and his neighbor had been at odds for years, ever since she had constructed an unsightly privacy fence that encroached on his property line. But their feud had escalated in recent months, with each party waging a petty, escalating battle of passive-aggressive one-upmanship. From blatantly leaving trash bins in the other's driveway to mysteriously borrowing garden tools, the two had become the talk of the cul-de-sac. However, tampering with the mail was a federal offense, one that Karen apparently hadn't anticipated when she decided to exact her latest revenge. Sam watched grimly as the agents approached her door, their heavy boots leaving deep imprints in the freshly fallen snow. He knew he should feel satisfied, but a twinge of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. After all, he had never intended for things to spiral this far out of control. The sound of raised voices and the slamming of a car door echoed across the frozen landscape as Karen was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. Sam exhaled a long, shaky breath, unsure whether to feel vindicated or simply disturbed by the turn of events. He had wanted justice, but not like this. Not with federal agents descending on his quiet suburban neighborhood and hauling off his longtime adversary in disgrace. As the unmarked vehicles slowly pulled away, Sam found himself reflecting on the series of petty grievances that had led to this moment. Had he really been so petty and vindictive himself, allowing the feud to escalate to the point of criminal charges? A pang of guilt tugged at his conscience, reminding him that he too had played a role in this downward spiral. With a heavy heart, Sam turned away from the window, unsure of what the future might hold. He knew that the consequences of Karen's actions would reverberate through the community, leaving lasting scars and unanswered questions. And deep down, he couldn't help but wonder if he too would ultimately bear the weight of his own stubborn refusal to let the conflict go. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed through the empty house as Sam paced anxiously, his mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. How had it all come to this? One moment, he'd have been an ordinary suburban homeowner, begrudgingly coexisting with his maddening neighbor. The next, federal agents were swooping in to arrest Karen on charges of mail tampering. Collapsing onto the worn leather sofa, Sam buried his head in his hands, the weight of guilt and uncertainty threatening to overwhelm him. He had wanted justice, yes, but not at the price of his neighbor's freedom. A part of him had always assumed that Karen's petty transgressions would simply fizzle out, that the conflict would eventually de-escalate as both parties realized the futility of their feud. But now, with the seriousness of the charges she faced, Sam couldn't help but feel a twinge of remorse. Had he inadvertently pushed her too far, goading her into a reckless act of retaliation that would now have lasting consequences? The thought made his stomach churn with unease. Lifting his head, Sam's gaze fell upon a framed photograph on the mantel. A warm, happy image of him and his wife, Emily, taken before the cancer had stolen her away. It had been nearly a year since her passing, and the pain of her absence still cut him to the core. In the wake of his devastating loss, the trivial squabbles with Karen had offered a welcome distraction, a petty outlet for his lingering grief and frustration. But now, as he stared at Emily's smiling face, Sam couldn't help but feel ashamed. What would she have thought of his behavior, of the way he allowed a simple neighborhood dispute to spiral out of control? Surely, she would have urged him to be the bigger person, to seek understanding and compromise rather than escalating the conflict. With a heavy sigh, Sam rose from the couch and crossed the room, reaching out to gently touch the smooth glass of the frame. "I'm sorry, Em," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I lost my way, and now an innocent person is paying the price." Steeling his resolve, Sam knew he had to find a way to make things right. Not just for Karen, but for himself and the community he had allowed to be torn apart. Grabbing his coat, he headed for the door, determined to confront the consequences of his actions head-on, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. The frigid wind whipped Sam's face as he stepped out into the biting cold, his breath forming clouds of condensation in the frosty air. With each crunch of his boots on the freshly fallen snow, a sense of determination filled him, propelling him forward toward the police station where Karen was being held. As he approached the imposing brick building, Sam paused, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled open the heavy door. The sterile, institutional atmosphere of the station made his skin crawl, a stark contrast to the cozy warmth of his own home. Steeling his nerves, he approached the front desk, where a bored-looking officer sat behind a thick pane of bulletproof glass. "I'm here to speak with Karen Wilkins," Sam announced, his voice steadier than he felt. "She was just brought in on charges of mail tampering." The officer eyed him skeptically, clearly unimpressed by his request. "Are you a lawyer?" Sam shook his head. "No, I'm her neighbor. I want to help her." The officer let out a derisive snort. "Neighbor? Huh. I'm not sure that's going to do her much good right now. Mail tampering is a federal offense, you know." Swallowing hard, Sam pressed on. "Please, I need to speak with her. I think I may have played a part in this whole situation." With a resigned sigh, the officer picked up the phone and muttered a few words, then gestured towards a dingy hallway. "Take a seat over there. Someone will be with you shortly." As Sam made his way to the indicated waiting area, his heart pounded in his chest. What exactly was he going to say to Karen? Would she even be willing to listen, or would she simply lash out at him in anger and blame? The uncertainty gnawed at his nerves, but he knew he had to at least try. After what felt like an eternity, the door at the end of the hallway opened, and a uniformed officer emerged, beckoning Sam to follow. Steeling himself, he trailed the officer down a stark, fluorescent-lit corridor until they reached a small, windowless room. Taking a deep breath, Sam stepped inside, his gaze immediately locking with Karen's, whose eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and defensiveness. "Karen," Sam began, his voice trembling slightly. I need to talk to you." Karen's eyes narrowed as Sam stepped into the cramped interrogation room, her lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. "What do you want, Sam?" She spat, her voice laced with a mixture of anger and resignation. Sam hesitated, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I wanted to apologize," he began, his words tentative. "I think I may have played a role in what happened, and I feel terrible about it." Karen's brow furrowed in confusion, her expression softening ever so slightly. "What are you talking about?" Shifting uncomfortably, Sam ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find the right words. "Our feud, Karen. It got out of control. I never intended for things to escalate this far." "Oh, save it," Karen scoffed, her features hardening once more. "You're the one who started all this, with your constant complaints about my fence and your stupid passive-aggressive games. If anyone's to blame, it's you." Sam flinched at her harsh words, but he pressed on, determined to make amends. "You're right, I'm not blameless in this. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I stooped to your level. But tampering with a mail? That's a federal crime, Karen. I never wanted it to go that far." Karen's gaze faltered, and for a moment, Sam caught a glimpse of uncertainty in her eyes. I didn't think they'd take it that seriously," she admitted, her defiant posture slipping. "But they did," Sam said softly, taking a step closer. "And now you're facing the consequences. That's why I'm here, Karen. I want to help you, to try and make this right." Karen stared at him, her expression a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. "Why would you want to help me? After everything that's happened between us?" Sam's shoulders sagged, the weight of his guilt and regret etched into his features. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because I'm as much to blame for this mess as you are. And because—" he paused, his voice catching in his throat. "Because I miss the way things used to be, before all this started." The room fell silent, the tension palpable as Karen processed his words. Finally, she let out a long, weary sigh. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table between them. "I miss it too." A glimmer of hope flickered in Sam's chest, and he took another step forward, reaching out to gently touch Karen's hand. "Then let me help you, Karen. Let's figure this out, together. I don't want to see you punished for something I've played a part in." Karen's eyes met his, and for the first time in years, Sam saw the warmth and kindness that had once defined their relationship. In that moment, he knew they had a chance to mend the rift between them, to find a way forward that didn't involve bitter recriminations or federal charges. Taking a deep breath, Sam squeezed Karen's hand, a small but meaningful gesture of solidarity. "We're going to get through this, I promise." The weight of Sam's words hung in the air, a fragile bridge spanning the gulf that had separated him and Karen for so long. As he held her gaze, a glimmer of hope flickered in her eyes, a stark contrast to the defiant hardness that had defined her expression just moments earlier. Karen's voice wavered, and she cleared her throat, her fingers tightening around Sam's hand. "I don't know if I can believe you, after everything that's happened." Sam nodded somberly, acknowledging the validity of her skepticism. "I understand, Karen. I've been just as stubborn and spiteful as you. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." Inhaling a deep, steadying breath, Karen searched his face, as if seeking the truth behind his sincerity. "So, what is it you're proposing, exactly?" "I want to help you fight these charges," Sam said, his voice firm. "I'll testify on your behalf, explain how our feud escalated to the point where you felt desperate enough to tamper with the mail." Karen's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting within them. "You'd do that, even after everything I've done?" Sam offered her a rueful smile. "Even after everything. We both made mistakes, Karen. And I think it's time we put this nonsense behind us, once and for all." Silence settled between them, thick with the weight of unspoken emotions. Finally, Karen gave a tentative nod, her lips curving into a small, uncertain smile. "Okay, Sam. I'm willing to give this a try." Relief flooded through Sam, his shoulders slumping as the tension drained from his body. "Thank you, Karen. I promise we're going to get through this together." As the officer returned to escort Karen back to her cell, Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. It was a fragile truce, to be sure, but the mere fact that they were willing to put aside their differences and work towards a common goal filled him with a glimmer of hope. Exiting the police station, Sam drew in a deep breath of the frigid winter air, his mind already racing with plans and strategies. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with setbacks and challenges, but he was determined to see this through. For the first time in years, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to make amends and heal the rift that had torn his community apart. With a renewed determination, Sam headed home, his footsteps crunching through the fresh snow. As he walked, he couldn't help but imagine a future where he and Karen could once again be the kind of friendly neighbors they had once been, where the cul-de-sac was filled with the sound of laughter and shared barbecues, rather than bitter feuds and petty squabbles. It was a dream, to be sure, but one that Sam was now more determined than ever to make a reality. In the days that followed, Sam threw himself into preparing Karen's defense, his determination fueling him through the long hours of research and strategy sessions. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but the thought of Karen facing the full brunt of federal prosecution only served to strengthen his resolve. Sitting across the table from Karen's court-appointed attorney, Sam laid out his plan, his words rapid and impassioned. We need to paint a picture of a neighborhood feud that spiraled out of control, he insisted, his brow furrowed in concentration. Show the court how our petty squabbles escalated, how the stress and frustration drove Karen to make a reckless, impulsive decision. The attorney, a seasoned public defender named Olivia, listened intently, her expression thoughtful. That's a solid strategy, she conceded, but we'll need to be very careful in how we present it. The court won't look kindly on any attempt to minimize the seriousness of the charges. Sam nodded, his fingers drumming anxiously on the table. I understand, but we have to try. Karen's facing potential jail time here, and I won't let that happen, not when I played a part in pushing her to this point. Olivia regarded him with a measured gaze, a hint of surprise flickering in her eyes. You're taking a big risk, Mr. Harding. Aligning yourself so closely with the defendant could have serious consequences, both professionally and personally. I don't care, Sam replied, his voice unwavering. Karen's my neighbor, my friend, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this right. Olivia studied him for a long moment, then the corner of her mouth twitched in a small, approving smile. All right then, let's get to work. Over the next several weeks, Sam and Olivia meticulously built their case, combing through every detail of the neighborhood feud and crafting a narrative that would resonate with the judge and jury. They interviewed neighbors, gathered evidence, and painstakingly reconstructed the escalating tensions that had led to Karen's fateful decision. As the trial date drew near, Sam found himself increasingly anxious, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. What if their efforts weren't enough? What if Karen still ended up paying the price for his own stubborn pride? The night before the trial, Sam sat alone in his living room, staring into the crackling flames of the fireplace. A photograph of Emily caught his eye, her gentle smile a bittersweet reminder of simpler times. I wish you were here, Em, he murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. I could use your wisdom right about now. Closing his eyes, he took a deep, steadying breath, steeling himself for the battle that lay ahead. Tomorrow, he would stand by Karen's side, ready to face the consequences of their actions, come what may. For better or worse, their fates were now inextricably linked, and Sam was determined to see this through, no matter the cost. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as Sam took the stand, his palms sweating and his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that his testimony would be the linchpin of Karen's defense, a crucial piece of the puzzle that could sway the judge and jury in their favor. As Olivia began her questioning, Sam took a deep breath and launched into his recollection of the events that had led to this moment. He described the initial disputes over the fence, the petty acts of retaliation that had gradually escalated, painting a vivid picture of the mounting stress and frustration that had taken hold of both him and Karen. We were both at fault, Sam admitted, his gaze steady as he met the scrutinizing eyes of the judge. I allowed my own resentment and pride to cloud my judgment, and I pushed Karen to the brink. If I had been the bigger person, if I had just let things go, none of this would have happened. Olivia nodded, her expression grave. And how do you believe that contributed to Karen's decision to tamper with the mail? Sam's shoulders sagged, the weight of guilt heavy upon him. She was desperate, Your Honor. Desperate to get back at me, to exact some kind of petty revenge. And in her mind, interfering with the mail was the only way she could do that. The courtroom fell silent, the judge and jury seeming to hang on Sam's every word. Finally, the judge cleared his throat, his brow furrowed in thought. So, you're saying that you bear some responsibility for the defendant's actions? Yes, Your Honor, Sam replied firmly. I may not have directly told Karen to tamper with the mail, but I played a role in creating the conditions that led her to make that choice. Olivia stepped forward, her expression solemn. Your Honor, the defense would like to submit that the neighborhood feud between Mr. Harding and the defendant was a significant contributing factor to the charges she now faces. We believe that, in light of the escalating nature of the conflict and the emotional toll it took on both parties, a more lenient sentence would be appropriate. The judge regarded them both with a thoughtful gaze, his fingers steepled under his chin. I will take your arguments under advisement. However, I must caution you that tampering with a mail is a serious federal offense, regardless of the circumstances. Sam felt his heart sink, a knot of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. Had he pushed too hard, asked for too much? As the judge adjourned the court for the day, he turned to Olivia, his eyes pleading. Do you think we have a chance? Olivia offered him a small, reassuring smile. We gave it our best shot, Sam. Now, all we can do is wait and see. The air was thick with anticipation as Sam and Karen sat side by side in the courtroom, waiting with bated breath for the judge's verdict. After weeks of testimony and legal wrangling, the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Sam glanced sideways at Karen, taking in the tense set of her jaw and the worry lines etched into her forehead. He reached out and gently squeezed her hand, offering a silent gesture of support. Karen returned the squeeze, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude and lingering uncertainty. Suddenly, the bailiff called the court to order, and the judge emerged, his expression unreadable. Sam felt his heart race as the judge began to speak, his words slow and deliberate. This has been a challenging case, fraught with complex issues of community tensions and personal responsibility. After careful consideration of the evidence and arguments presented, I have reached a decision. The judge paused, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom. While the defendant's actions were indeed a violation of federal law, I find that the unique circumstances of this case warrant a more lenient approach. The neighborhood feud, as described by the witness, Mr. Harding, appears to have been a significant contributing factor to the defendant's decision-making process. Sam felt a wave of relief wash over him, his grip on Karen's hand tightening. The judge continued, Therefore, I am sentencing the defendant to 2 years of probation, with the requirement of completing a conflict resolution program and performing 200 hours of community service. Karen's eyes widened, and Sam felt her body relax beside him. The judge's words had spared her from the harsh penalties she had faced, offering a path towards redemption and reconciliation. Furthermore, the judge added, his gaze settling on Sam, I commend Mr. Harding for his willingness to take responsibility and testify on the defendant's behalf. His actions demonstrate the power of empathy and understanding, even in the face of long-standing conflict. As the court was adjourned, Sam and Karen turned to each other, their faces a mix of relief, disbelief, and a newfound sense of cautious optimism. Without a word, they embraced, the tension and hostility that had once defined their relationship replaced by a fragile but palpable bond of understanding. In that moment, Sam knew that the journey ahead would not be an easy one, but he was determined to rebuild the bridges that had been burned. With Karen by his side, he would work tirelessly to mend the rift in their community, to create a future where neighbors could once again coexist in harmony. As they stepped out into the crisp winter air, Sam felt a glimmer of hope take root in his heart. The road to redemption would be long, but with Karen's forgiveness and the support of their community, he knew that they could overcome the past and forge a brighter tomorrow.